You know, when I was a kid, I fell in love with Bing Crosby.
Ah.
I was about 8 years old and raised in the Bronx in a two-family house. And even though my great aunt owned the house, she lived on the second floor, and my family was on the first floor, she would go down to that cellar 9 o'clock every night, the coldest nights of the year, and flip off that cold, you know, to stop the whole thing. But Crosby was on at 9:30 at night on WNEW here in town, which was the big radio station. And they gave him a half hour from 9:30 to 10. And I heard this man's voice, and I thought it was so friendly, so warm. So that I began following him. And in those days, in the 30s, as maybe you recall, during the height of the real depression that we had in America, the songwriters were writing songs to make people feel better about themselves. So one of the songs that Crosby sang and that I became so attached to was Pennies from Heaven. Every time it rains, pennies from heaven. Don't you know each cloud contains pennies from heaven? I mean, it told a story. It gave people some hope about the future. And so I loved that song. And at 8 years old, I wanted to be Bing Crosby. And Bing Crosby, you know, he owned the Pittsburgh Pirates. He built the raceway down there at Del Mar, the horse track. He was quite a guy. He was a hunter. He was a fisherman. He was a pretty fabulous guy. But, of course, I'm growing up in the Bronx. You know the Bronx there. And singing this song to myself. And my mother, who was Italian, and my father, who was Irish, wanted to know what I was going to do with my life. I'm 10 years old. And I'm thinking, God, do I tell them I want to be Bing Crosby? I better not. So I don't tell them. And the years go by, and they keep after me. They were very concerned because
What are you gonna do?
depression, you know, what are you going to do with your life? And so I went to Cardinal Hayes High School in the Bronx. And then my father was in the Marine Corps in World War II, mounted up in the islands and the jungles. And there was a fellow there named Moose Krause from Notre Dame, who was a great player for Newt Rockne, who was a coach at Notre Dame, became the athletic director. At nights, he would get his fellow Marine officers and stand up in front of a fire in the jungle and tell them Notre Dame stories. The Four Horsemen, George Gipp, all those stories, Newt Rockne. My father became attached to Notre Dame, so when I graduated, I thought I would go to Fordham, which is a college, a good college right in the Bronx. You know, you're going to Notre Dame. So I went to Notre Dame, but my parents kept asking me, what do you want to do with your life? And finally, 2 weeks before I graduated, and I had hung around with this kid for 4 years, I found out he could play the piano. And I said, you know what, Gus, do you know Pennies from Heaven? He said, yes. I said, I'm going to sing that to my mother. So let's go rehearse it. So for 2 weeks, this guy, Gus Falcone, and I went to the Notre Dame Music Hall, went into a little room and rehearsed, every time it rains, pennies from heaven. So my mother comes to Notre Dame to my graduation, and my father. And they run into a thunderstorm just outside of South Bend. So by the time they get to Notre Dame, they're a little bit rattled. So I said, don't say anything, Mom. I'm gonna tell you what I want to do with my life. Okay. I said, walk with me. We walked across the campus. We went into the musical. Gus is waiting in the room. We opened the door. We walk in. I cue Gus. My mother's standing there. And I sing to her, every time it rains. And I sing the whole song. And I notice while I'm singing, my mother is crying. And my father, tough old Marine, is flexing his fists. Like they're very, very unhappy with my choice.
Oh, no.
And I said, oh, forget it. This is ridiculous. I want to be Bing Crosby. I don't even know what I'm doing, you know. So anyway, make a long story short, I go into the Navy, and I wind up out in California. And this Marine major on my day out that I hung around with, tough old guy, 2 wars and waiting around. He was a professional Marine waiting for the next war. And he said, well, what are you going to do with your life? I said, well, you know, I think I want to go into television. I saw a guy named Jack Parr, but I don't know what my talent is. And this guy said to me, don't you know you can have anything you want in this life? You've only got to want it bad enough. Now, do you want it? I said, yes, sir. He frightened me. I said, oh. And I went up and I got the job at KCOP. 15 years later, I'm with Joey Bishop. And one night, Bing Crosby is our guest. And he's sitting right next to me. I couldn't believe it. How do I tell this guy?
Did he change my life?
That's right.
Yeah,
This is exactly the, like who advised you about your life. So anyway, I used to walk with Bishop every day up Vine Street in Hollywood, to Hollywood Boulevard, back down. And every day, I would do the talking. So one day Bishop says to me, what did you want to be when you were a kid? I said, well, I wanted to be Bing Crosby. What did you? I wanted to be a comedian, he said. And when I was 10 years old in Philadelphia, I'd have the people standing on the street corners, and I'd make them laugh. And I knew I could do it, and he did it. Became a part of the Rat Pack, hung with Sinatra and Dean and Sammy.
Yeah.
You know all those guys. So here's Bing Crosby. So they were afraid to ask Bing Crosby to sing on the show because he was so big, and this was just a talk show. So Bishop thought he'd take a chance. He said, Bing, see this kid? He knew all your songs. Would you sing a song for him? So Bing Crosby turns, looks at me, and sings Tora Lura Lura. So then Bishop didn't have enough. He said, go ahead. You knew all of Crosby's songs, all the lyrics when you were a little boy, because I told him the whole story.
Yeah, sure.
Sing a song to Bing. So I looked at Bing Crosby. It's like I'm looking at Aaron here, and Orion, and Velez. And you know what I said to Bing Crosby? Every time it rains, it rains. Next day, I get a recording contract. Mercury Records, yeah. To do an album of Bing Crosby songs.
Oh, that's
I never would have gotten to believe me if it wasn't Bing. And please, I didn't do it because I could sing.
Yes, you did.
But anyway.
But you would never have had that opportunity.
That was a turning point in my life.